September 1st, 1939. Dawn over Polish lands is darkened by the roar of German planes and the rumble of tank columns. World War II begins. While the world watches the fall of Warsaw and the heroic defense of Westerplatte, in the shadow of these events, an equally terrible tragedy unfolds. The Battle of the Road of Death near Czełusz. A small settlement lost among the Polish plains will become the site of one of the bloodiest battles of the initial stage of the war. In a few hours of fierce fighting, German machine guns and artillery will turn the road into a real meat grinder, claiming the lives of tens of thousands of Polish soldiers. This battle, almost forgotten in the shadow of larger events, became a symbol not only of Polish courage, but also of tragic command errors. For Poland, it is an unhealing wound and a symbol of national resilience. For Germany, an example of tactical superiority. For Russia and France, a lesson in military art that will be meticulously studied in military academies. The road near Czełusz is a place where history is written in the blood of thousands of young people whose names will forever remain in the memory of the people. If one looks at a map of Poland in September 1939, Czełusz might seem like an unremarkable spot. However, it was precisely the geographical location of this small settlement that predetermined its tragic fate in the first days of the war. Situated at the intersection of vital transport arteries, Czełusz represented a natural communication hub between the northwestern and central regions of the country. Control over it opened a direct path to industrial centers and, more importantly, to the capital. The Polish command was well aware of the strategic value of this point, making it one of the key elements of the defensive plan. The natural landscape around Czełusz seemed ideal for organizing a defense. Hilly terrain interspersed with forested areas allowed for control of the approaches to the main road. However, what Polish strategists considered an advantage, German tacticians turned into a deadly trap. The road itself, later ominously named the Road of Death, ran through relatively open terrain, squeezed between two ridges of hills. This terrain feature created ideal conditions for organizing crossfire. German engineering units, which arrived here several days before the start of hostilities, masterfully utilized the features of the terrain. Camouflaged firing points were set up on the high ground, and artillery was positioned to sweep every meter of the road. An additional factor that exacerbated the tragedy was the weather. September fogs, characteristic of this region, limited visibility, rendering Polish reconnaissance practically useless. Advancing units lacked accurate data on the location and strength of German positions. The road to Czełusz became not just a path to a strategically important point, it turned into a corridor leading nowhere. The decision of the Polish command to direct significant forces precisely to this sector of the front was dictated not only by military necessity, but also by political considerations. Holding Czełusz symbolized Poland's ability to resist aggression. This was not just a tactical move, it was a matter of national pride and honor. The tragic irony was that precisely these noble motives, combined with an underestimation of the enemy, led to catastrophic consequences. The Polish army, which met the German invasion in September 1939, was a contradictory phenomenon. With a strength of about 900,000 soldiers, it was the fourth largest army in Europe, but its combat effectiveness raised serious questions. The armament of Polish units remained at the level of the First World War. Outdated Mauser rifles, a limited amount of artillery, and a critical shortage of anti-tank weapons. Cavalry units, the pride of the Polish military tradition, could do little against German tank divisions. The morale of the soldiers, however, was exceptionally high. They sincerely believed in their ability to repel aggression and defend their homeland. This belief was reinforced by patriotic education and the memory of the victory over the Bolsheviks in 1920. Unfortunately, enthusiasm and courage could not compensate for technological backwardness and strategic miscalculations. On the eve of the Battle of Chelmno, the Polish command made a fatal decision: to send elite units of the Poznan army to this sector of the front. According to the plan, these forces were supposed to stop the advance of the German army group south and prevent the encirclement of the main Polish forces. The decision to concentrate significant resources on holding Chelmno was dictated not only by military logic, but also by political considerations: the need to demonstrate the determination to resist the aggressor. By September 7th, the overall situation on the front for the Polish army was catastrophic. German tank wedges deeply penetrated the country's territory. Luftwaffe aviation dominated the air, destroying communications and demoralizing troops. The command system was gradually collapsing. Many units acted almost autonomously, without communication with higher headquarters. Under these conditions, the command of the Poznan army received an order to break through Chelmno at all costs, to link up with units retreating to Warsaw. The tragedy was that Polish intelligence catastrophically underestimated the strength of the German defenses in this sector. Commanders were sure that they would only encounter advanced Wehrmacht units without heavy weapons. In reality, the Germans had turned the Chelmno area into a powerful, fortified area, saturated with artillery and machine gun nests. The soldiers sent to break through did not suspect that they were walking straight into a carefully prepared trap. Their courage and self-sacrifice proved powerless in the face of the cold calculation of German strategists. By September 8, 1939, the German command already knew about the planned Polish counterattack in the Czełusz area. Luftwaffe intelligence data, aerial reconnaissance, and reports from the agent network allowed for the precise determination of the main direction of the Polish thrust. General Walter von Reichenau, commanding the 10th Army of the Wehrmacht, decided to turn this section of the front into a deadly trap. German engineering units worked around the clock, creating a multi-layered defense system. On the commanding heights, concrete machine gun positions with interlocking fields of fire were equipped. Heavy MG-34 machine guns, nicknamed saws by soldiers for their characteristic firing sound, could unleash up to 1,200 rounds per minute, creating an impenetrable wall of fire. Artillery positions were located on the second line of defense. 105mm howitzers and 75mm anti-tank guns were carefully camouflaged and zeroed in on key points of the road. Each artillery crew had precise coordinates for firing on predetermined squares. The strength of the German grouping at Czełusz was about 15,000 men, significantly fewer than the advancing Polish forces. However, the qualitative superiority in weaponry and training, as well as advantageous defensive positions, multiplied their combat effectiveness many times over. The German command paid special attention to camouflage. Forward positions were practically invisible from the road. Machine gun nests were skillfully hidden under natural vegetation, and artillery positions were covered with camouflage nets. Even an experienced observer would have difficulty detecting signs of a significant force's presence. The German tactical plan was simple and effective: to lure Polish units onto an open section of the road, and then open massive fire from all sides. German commanders received strict orders not to open fire until the main Polish forces were drawn into the, quote, one. The discipline and composure of the German soldiers played a decisive role in the success of this plan. forward German units were deliberately weakened to create the illusion of an easy victory for the Poles. Several tanks and armored personnel carriers demonstratively retreated after a short fight, luring the enemy into the prepared trap. The Luftwaffe also contributed to the operation's preparation. German reconnaissance aircraft continuously monitored the movement of Polish columns, transmitting precise data on their numbers and direction of movement. Fighters and bombers were on constant standby to support ground units. The dawn of September 9, 1939, was foggy. Low clouds obscured the sun, plunging the vicinity of Czełusz into a gray haze. At 6 in the morning, the first units of the Polish army began their advance towards the ill-fated road. The vanguard consisted of cavalry squadrons, followed by infantry units, supported by several light tanks and armored cars. The soldiers marched with full confidence that they would meet only weak resistance from a retreating enemy. The German positions maintained a deathly silence. According to orders, not a single machine gun was to open fire until a special signal. Polish intelligence reported the absence of large enemy formations, which further strengthened the command's confidence in the success of the operation. The first shots rang out around 7 o'clock, when the leading Polish units made contact with German combat outposts. A brief skirmish ensued, after which the Germans began to retreat, drawing the Poles after them, straight into a prepared trap. Colonel Stanislaw Maciek, commanding the advance detachment, decided to press the advantage and accelerate the advance. This precisely matched the German plan. By 8 o'clock in the morning, the main forces of the Polish grouping had entered the narrow pass between the hills. The long column stretched for several kilometers. It was at this moment that a signal flare shot up from the German positions. Seconds later, dozens of machine guns and artillery pieces opened a hurricane of fire on the road. The first victims were the cavalrymen of the vanguard. The dense fire literally swept them from the face of the earth. The leading tanks were knocked out by anti-tank guns, creating a bottleneck on the road. Panic gripped the Polish ranks. Soldiers tried to take cover in roadside ditches, but machine gun fire reached them there too. Commanders shouted contradictory orders. Signalmen tried in vain to establish contact with headquarters. German artillery methodically shelled square after square. Shells exploded among the crowded Polish units, turning the road into a bloody mess. Polish officers displayed miracles of bravery, attempting to organize counterattacks. Captain Tadeusz Wiszomirski gathered a group of 30 soldiers and tried to attack the nearest German machine gun post, but was cut down by a machine gun burst a few meters from his target. Lieutenant Colonel Kazimierz Rejewski, seeing the hopelessness of the situation, ordered a retreat, but it was already too late. The Germans had blocked the escape route. By 10 o'clock in the morning, it became clear that the Polish units were encircled. Radios were silent, ammunition was running out, and the wounded were dying without medical attention. German machine gunners acted with mechanical precision, sparingly using ammunition and choosing the most important targets. By noon, almost nothing remained of the leading Polish units. The road was littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers and horses. Disabled vehicles and tanks burned. The survivors tried to take cover in the tree line, but even there, German shells reached them. The first hours of the battle showed the absolute superiority of German tactics. The Polish command, having received meager information about the scale of the catastrophe, tried to organize a relief strike, but there were no reserves left. September 11th, 10 o'clock in the morning. The road near Czełusz became a veritable hell. Polish units, drawn into the deadly corridor between the hills, found themselves in a perfect trap, meticulously planned by the German command with cold precision. The apogee of the battle had arrived, the moment when hope finally abandoned the hearts of the Polish soldiers. Quote Zero recalled Corporal Joseph Kowalski, a survivor of that meat grinder, later. German machine gunners followed clear instructions to fire short, economical bursts, methodically sweeping one sector after another. They did not waste ammunition on single targets, waiting until a group of Polish soldiers gathered in an open area. This tactic maximized the effectiveness of each shot. Artillery fire was organized no less skillfully. German observers adjusted their fire, shifting the impact zone as Polish units advanced. Shells exploded with mathematical precision, turning the road into a lunar landscape. The very configuration of the terrain played a tragic role. The narrow road, squeezed between the hills, did not allow for maneuvering. Disabled vehicles created jams, blocking the path of retreat. Soldiers attempting to hide in roadside ditches became easy targets for mortar fire, recounted 2nd Lieutenant Stanislaw Mazurkiewicz. The Polish command made a fatal error by not organizing proper reconnaissance. Forward units entered the kill zone without any knowledge of the enemy's true strength. By the time the scale of the disaster became apparent, it was too late. The main forces were trapped. Individual groups of Polish soldiers attempted to organize counterattacks. Lieutenant Tadeusz Komorowski gathered about 50 men and tried to break through to the German positions on the northern slope. They managed to suppress 2 machine gun nests, but then the group came under crossfire and was annihilated. By noon, the road near Czełusz presented an apocalyptic scene. Burning vehicles, bodies of the dead, wounded for whom there was no one to provide aid. German machine guns continued to methodically sweep every meter of the territory, leaving no chance for salvation. The road, intended as a path for retreat and regrouping, became a road to nowhere, a road of death that claimed thousands of lives in a matter of hours. This was not just a military failure, it was a tragedy of national scale, a wound that will not heal in Polish memory. The figures that shocked the world. That is what remained after the Battle of Chelm. According to Polish military archives, in this battle the Polish army lost over 28,000 men killed and about 7,000 wounded. German losses amounted to only 342 killed and about 600 wounded. Such a monstrous disproportion of losses turned the road of death into a symbol of military catastrophe. Every meter of this ill-fated road was literally strewn with the bodies of the fallen. German soldiers who arrived to clear the area after the battle were shocked by what they saw. "It was like a slaughterhouse," wrote Oberleutnant Wilhelm Hoffmann in his diary. "I never thought I would see so many dead in one place. Even our seasoned veterans were shocked." Among the dead was the flower of the Polish army: career officers, experienced sergeants, elite units. Colonel Andrzej Kosakowski, commander of one of the attacking regiments, was found with a pistol in his hand. He preferred suicide to captivity when he realized the hopelessness of the situation. Captain Tadeusz Brzezinski, father of the future American politician Zbigniew Brzezinski, miraculously survived this meat grinder. "I survived only because I fell into a shell crater and was covered with earth," he recalled years later. "When I came to, there was only silence and the dead around me." Particularly tragic were the fates of young conscripts, many of whom had held a weapon for the first time only a few weeks before the war. Corporal Joseph Kowalczyk, an 18-year-old native of Poznan, wrote his last letter home the day before the battle. "Dear Mother, don't worry about me. We will soon defeat the Germans and I will return home for the harvest." His body was identified among the dead by his dog tag. Sergeant Kazimierz Nowak left his pregnant wife in Krakow. She received news of his death on the same day she gave birth to their son. These personal tragedies multiplied 1,000-fold, affecting almost every Polish family. The German command, analyzing the results of the battle, was struck by the effectiveness of its tactics. General Heinz Guderian personally visited the battlefield and subsequently used the experience of Chelm in planning operations in France. For the Poles, however, this battle became a symbol of national tragedy, but at the same time a symbol of an unyielding spirit. The Chelmno tragedy was the result of a series of tactical miscalculations by the Polish command. Analyzing the events of those fateful September days, military historians identify several critical errors that turned the operation into a national catastrophe. The first, and perhaps most fatal error, was the catastrophic underestimation of enemy forces. The staff of the Poznan army had outdated information about German positions, believing that only advanced Wehrmacht units without heavy weaponry were located in the Chelmno area. Polish intelligence, limited in means and capabilities, failed to detect meticulously camouflaged artillery positions and machine gun nests. General Tadeusz Kuczeba, commander of the Poznan army, decided to advance based on incomplete and largely erroneous data. The second fatal error was the disregard for reports from advanced reconnaissance groups. The day before the offensive, several cavalry patrols reported suspicious activity in the forests around the road, but these reports were dismissed as exaggerations and did not affect the overall operation plan. Captain Jerzy Skoroński, commander of the reconnaissance squadron, insisted on conducting additional reconnaissance of the area, but was categorically refused by his superior command. "We need advancement, not caution," Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Maciek replied to him, paying for this overconfidence with his own life a few hours later. The third factor that predetermined the tragedy was the outdated military doctrine adhered to by the Polish command. Based on the experience of the First World War and the Polish-Soviet War of 1920, it relied on the maneuverability of cavalry and massive frontal infantry attacks. Meanwhile, the German army had already switched to the concept of blitzkrieg, using tank wedges, aviation, and carefully planned fire ambushes. Polish commanders did not adapt their tactics to the new realities of war. The fourth error was the lack of flexibility in executing the plan. When the first units made contact with the enemy, and it became clear that the German defense was stronger than anticipated, the command was unable to promptly adjust the offensive plan. Instead of stopping and regrouping, Polish units continued to move along the road, entering deeper and deeper into a deadly trap. The fifth critical error was the neglect of organizing interaction between various branches of service. Infantry advanced without proper artillery support, reconnaissance operated in isolation from the main forces, and the few tanks were used inefficiently. As a result, Polish units could not concentrate firepower in key areas. Particular responsibility for what happened lies with the High Command. Marshal Edward Rydz Śmigły, Commander-in-Chief of the Polish Armed Forces, insisted on active offensive operations despite the generally unfavorable situation on the front. Political considerations often prevailed over military expediency. The need to demonstrate a determination to fight pushed commanders into risky operations without proper provisions. The Chelmno tragedy became a bitter lesson for military theorists around the world, demonstrating how a series of tactical miscalculations can lead to catastrophic consequences. The price of these errors is measured in thousands of human lives, cut short on the road of death. The German defensive strategy at Czełusz became a classic example of military art, still studied in military academies worldwide. The Wehrmacht's success was based on several key factors, each playing a decisive role in creating the ideal defensive position. First and foremost, the German command masterfully utilized the terrain features. The hilly landscape with dominant heights around the road transformed into a natural fortress. Wehrmacht engineer units enhanced these natural advantages by creating an echeloned defense system with meticulously planned firing sectors. Every meter of the road was covered by fire from at least 3 positions, creating an impenetrable curtain of fire. Colonel Heinrich Eberbach, who oversaw the defensive works, later recalled, "The second key factor was the effective placement of firing points. German machine gun nests were located at different heights and depths, allowing for multi-layered fire. Heavy MG-34 machine guns occupied commanding positions, providing maximum visibility. Light machine guns were placed at intermediate points, covering dead zones. Artillery was positioned on the second line of defense, protecting it from sudden attacks while simultaneously allowing it to effectively engage targets on the road. The technical superiority of German troops also played a decisive role. Modern communication means allowed for real-time coordination of all units. Every company commander had a radio, ensuring instantaneous transmission of orders and fire adjustments. Polish units, however, often operated blindly, lacking accurate information about the enemy and not receiving timely instructions from command. The discipline and training of German soldiers deserve special attention. Machine gunners did not open fire until the last moment, allowing Polish units to become more deeply ensnared in the trap. Artillerymen accurately followed the observer's instructions, methodically shifting fire from one sector to another. Such coordinated actions significantly enhanced the effectiveness of the defense. The German defensive strategy at Czełusz perfectly fit into the blitzkrieg concept. By creating powerful defensive strongholds in secondary directions, the German command freed up mobile units to deliver decisive blows in the main directions. General Heinz Guderian, analyzing the results of the battle, noted, "Czełusz showed that even with relatively small forces, one can hold back a superior enemy if the terrain and firepower are used correctly." This experience was subsequently successfully applied in campaigns against France, Yugoslavia, and the Soviet Union. The German command learned several important lessons from the battle at Czełusz. Firstly, the effectiveness of the tactic of luring the enemy into pre-prepared kill zones was confirmed. Secondly, the importance of thorough camouflage of defensive positions was proven. Thirdly, the advantage of echeloned defense over linear formations became evident. These conclusions were incorporated into new Wehrmacht tactical manuals and used in the training of command personnel. The defensive success at Czełusz also had psychological significance for the German army. Soldiers and officers became convinced of the superiority of their military doctrine and technical equipment. This boosted the morale of the Wehrmacht and contributed to the formation of a sense of superiority, which, however, played a cruel trick on the German army in the subsequent years of the war, giving rise to dangerous overconfidence. The disaster at Czełusz became a turning point in the Polish campaign of 1939. These several hours of bloody battle not only claimed the lives of tens of thousands of Polish soldiers, they effectively predetermined the fate of the entire country in the nascent World War. The scale of losses was so immense that the Polish army could no longer restore its combat effectiveness. The Polish High Command received news of the tragedy at Czełusz belatedly. Marshal Edward Rydz-Śmigły, who was at the staff in Brest-Litovsk at the time, was shocked by the scale of the catastrophe. According to eyewitnesses, he spent several hours poring over maps, trying to find reserves for a counterattack, but was forced to admit such reserves no longer existed. We lost not just an army, we lost hope. These words, attributed to the marshal, accurately reflected the situation. The Poznan army, considered one of the most combat-ready formations of the Polish armed forces, effectively ceased to exist as an organized military unit. For the German command, the success at Czełusz confirmed the effectiveness of their chosen strategy. Colonel General Walter von Brauchitsch, commander-in-chief of the German ground forces, upon receiving the report on the battle's results, immediately sent a congratulatory telegram to the commanders of the units involved in the operation. Adolf Hitler, learning of the scale of Polish losses, personally noted this battle as an exemplary display of military art. German propaganda widely exploited the victory at Czełusz, presenting it as proof of the superiority of the German war machine. Newsreels captured long columns of Polish prisoners and mountains of captured weapons after the battle. Wehrmacht military analysts thoroughly studied the battle's experience, drawing several important conclusions. The main one was the effectiveness of the fire pocket tactic against a numerically superior enemy. This experience was subsequently used in planning operations against the French army in 1940. For Polish society, the news of the tragedy at Czełusz came as a shock. Thousands of families received casualty notifications or news of missing persons. Many Polish officers who avoided death in this battle later found themselves in German captivity and shared the fate of the Katyn victims. Strategically, the loss of such a large number of trained soldiers and officers made it impossible to create a new defense line east of the Vistula, as originally planned. The Polish government was forced to accelerate its evacuation to Romania, realizing that military defeat was inevitable. Just a week after the tragedy at Czełusz, on September 17, 1939, the Soviet Union introduced troops into the eastern territories of Poland, definitively sealing the fate of the Polish state. The demoralized remnants of the Polish army could no longer offer serious resistance on two fronts. In Poland, the memory of the tragedy on the road of death near Czełusz is preserved with special reverence. This place has become a symbol of national sorrow and, at the same time, a symbol of the unyielding Polish spirit. Annually, in September, thousands of Poles gather at the memorial complex erected on the site of the bloody battle. The central element of the memorial is a majestic obelisk of black granite, with the names of the fallen carved into it. On both sides of the road, bronze sculptures are installed, depicting Polish soldiers at the moment of their last battle, with raised rifles and standing tall as a symbol of unbroken courage. The history of memorializing this tragedy was not simple. In the first post-war years, when Poland was under Soviet influence, official propaganda preferred not to emphasize the defeats of September 1939. The Battle of Czełusz was mentioned only in passing, without a detailed analysis of the causes of the catastrophe. Only in the 1960s, when the political climate somewhat softened, did a serious study of the events and the perpetuation of the memory of the fallen begin. In 1968, the first modest monument was unveiled at the battle site. Local residents, many of whom lost relatives in that battle, raised funds for a granite stele with a simple inscription, "To those who fell for the motherland." Every year on September 9th, memorial services were held here, attended by the few surviving participants of the battle. A real breakthrough in the memorialization of the tragedy occurred after the fall of the communist regime in 1989. Freed from ideological constraints, Polish society began to speak openly about all aspects of the September campaign, including command errors and the real scale of losses. In 1993, the government allocated significant funds for the creation of a full-fledged memorial complex at Czełusz. Today, a modern museum operates at the battle site. where visitors can see personal belongings of the fallen soldiers, documents, photographs, weapons, and equipment from those years. Especially valuable exhibits are letters that soldiers sent home on the eve of the battle. Many of these letters were never received by their addressees. They were found in a field postal bag discovered by search parties decades after the battle. An important part of the memorial work has been educational programs for school children and students. Annually, thousands of young Poles visit Czełusz as part of history lessons. Special excursions, event reconstructions, and meetings with historians are organized for them. This allows new generations to maintain a living connection with their country's past. In modern Poland, the road of death has become more than just a place of national sorrow. It is a symbol of the resilience of the Polish people in the face of trials, a reminder of the price of freedom and independence. Every year on the anniversary of the battle, a large-scale ceremony is held here with the participation of high-ranking state officials, military personnel, clergy, and thousands of ordinary citizens. While the Battle of Czełusz remains a symbol of national tragedy and Polish historical memory, the perception of these events in Germany has undergone a complex evolution, from triumphalist propaganda to critical reflection in the context of Nazi crimes. In September 1939, the German propaganda machine instantly transformed the victory at Czełusz into a vivid symbol of the Wehrmacht's military superiority. Joseph Goebbels' Ministry of Propaganda organized a massive campaign in the press, radio broadcasts, and newsreels. Weekly reviews in German cinemas showed footage of defeated Polish columns, long lines of prisoners, and mountains of captured weapons. The triumph of German military genius. This was the headline of one of the central newspapers reporting on the battle. Officers and soldiers who participated in the battle received awards from the highest ranks of the Third Reich. Colonel Heinrich Eberbach, who led the defensive operation, was awarded the Knight's Cross and promoted in rank. German military theorists meticulously analyzed the battle's experience. Major General Erich von Manstein, in his report to the General Staff, specifically noted the exemplary organization of coordinated fire between different branches of service. The tactical methods employed at Czełusz were incorporated into the curricula of Wehrmacht officer schools. However, after Germany's defeat in World War II, the attitude towards this battle fundamentally changed. In the first post-war decades, it was preferred not to recall it at all. In divided Germany, especially in the GDR, any mention of Wehrmacht military successes was taboo. In West Germany, the concept of "2" dominated, an aspiration to start history with a clean slate, separating itself from the Nazi past. Only in the 1970s did German historians begin to return to studying the Polish campaign, including the events at Czełusz. But now, the analysis was conducted in a fundamentally different vein. Professor Hans-Ulrich Wehler of the University of Munich, in his monograph, first raised the question of the ethical side of the Wehler wrote, "Modern Germany views the Battle of Czełusz in the broader context of the politics of historical responsibility. In history textbooks, this battle is described as part of Nazi Germany's criminal aggression against a sovereign state. Military aspects recede into the background, giving way to reflections on human casualties and moral responsibility." In the 2000s, the German government funded the creation of a traveling exhibition, The Road of Death, a forgotten tragedy, which was shown in many cities in Germany and Poland. The exhibition focused on the fates of specific individuals, both Polish victims and German soldiers who participated in the battle. Former President of the Federal Republic of Germany, Joachim Gauck, who visited the memorial at Czełusz in the year 2000, expressed deep regret for the tragedy and emphasized the importance of preserving its memory as a reminder of the consequences of militarism and nationalism. Today, in the Bundeswehr's military academies, the Battle of Czełusz is studied not only from a tactical perspective, but also as an example of how a technically perfect military operation can be part of a criminal war. Officers are instilled with the understanding that military skill is inseparable from ethical principles and international law. German and Polish historians are currently working on joint research projects dedicated to the events of September 1939. This academic cooperation has become an important element of Polish-German reconciliation, demonstrating how tragic pages of shared history can serve as a basis for building new relations between peoples. Soviet military analysts closely monitored developments on the western border from the first days of the German invasion of Poland. The Battle of Czełusz, despite its local nature, aroused particular interest in Red Army staff circles. Colonel Ivan Bagramian, who at that time worked in the operational department of the General Staff, organized a special group to collect and analyze information about this battle. Using intelligence data, testimonies of Polish officers who crossed the Soviet border, and captured German documents, Soviet military historians were able to reconstruct a fairly accurate picture of what happened. The first analytical materials about the battle appeared as early as November 1939 in the closed bulletin Wojenna Myśl, Military Thought. The author of the article, Colonel Mikhail Galaktionov, particularly emphasized the danger of rigid thinking and neglect of intelligence. The Polish command acted according to outdated canons, ignoring the elementary rules of modern warfare. The massive use of infantry without proper artillery preparation and air support turned the offensive into a suicidal attack. The conclusions drawn from the analysis of the battle had a noticeable impact on the development of Soviet military doctrine. First of all, the concept of frontal attacks was revised. If earlier Soviet tactical manuals allowed for frontal assaults by infantry forces with artillery support, now the emphasis shifted towards maneuver warfare with outflanking enemy fortified positions. The second important lesson concerned the organization of intelligence. After studying the circumstances of the tragedy at Czełusz, the Red Army strengthened its military intelligence units and improved their technical equipment. Special attention was paid to training scouts for operations behind enemy lines, to identify camouflaged firing points and artillery positions. The third significant conclusion was the understanding of the importance of cooperation between different branches of the armed forces. Soviet military theorists noted that the Polish offensive was doomed due to the lack of coordination between infantry, artillery, and the few tanks. As a result, in the pre-war years, the Red Army actively practiced issues of interaction at the tactical level. It is particularly interesting that the lessons of Czełusz influenced the development of Soviet military engineering. Analyzing German tactics of creating camouflaged firing points, Soviet engineers developed new types of field fortifications as well as methods for their rapid detection and neutralization. After the start of the Great Patriotic War, the experience of Czełusz received a new interpretation. General Alexander Vasilevsky, in his directive to front commanders in August 1941, directly referred to the Polish experience. It is necessary to avoid moving large columns along open roads without thorough reconnaissance and fire cover. The tragic experience of the Polish army at Czełusz should serve as a warning to our commanders. In the post-war period, the Battle of Czełusz became a mandatory element of the curriculum in Soviet military academies. cadets thoroughly analyzed the mistakes of the Polish command and the effectiveness of German defensive tactics. This material was studied particularly in detail at the General Staff Academy, where future senior military leaders learned strategic thinking. The French perspective on the tragedy at Czełusz represents a unique chapter in the study of this battle. For French military analysts, the battle became an ominous premonition of their own fate. When, in May 1940, Wehrmacht tank columns broke through the defenses at Sedan, many French officers bitterly recalled the Polish lesson they had neglected. Colonel Charles de Gaulle, the future leader of Free France, was one of the few who carefully studied the events at Czełusz as early as the autumn of 1939. In his analytical report to the Supreme War Council, he wrote, "The tragedy of the Polish army at Czełusz is not merely a tactical defeat. It is a verdict on an outdated military doctrine which, unfortunately, also dominates our army." His warnings were ignored. General Maurice Gamelin, commander-in-chief of the French army, considered the Polish experience inapplicable to French realities. "We have the Maginot Line," he declared, "and our military organization is incomparable to Poland's." This fatal delusion cost France defeat. After the fall of France, already in exile, French military theorists returned to analyzing the Polish experience. General Maxime Weygand, who led the French army in the last days before capitulation, wrote in his memoirs, "There is a direct parallel between Czełusz and Sedan. In both cases, we see a fatal combination of tactical errors: underestimation of the enemy, disregard for intelligence data, outdated doctrine, and a lack of flexibility in decision-making." French analysts discovered a striking similarity between the actions of the Polish and French commands. Both armies relied on outdated notions about the nature of modern warfare. Both underestimated the mobility and firepower of German troops. Both suffered from the bureaucratization of the command system, where critical decisions were made too slowly. The French particularly meticulously studied the German tactic of creating fire pockets. What happened at Czełusz was almost exactly repeated in France. German units lured the enemy into pre-prepared positions where they came under devastating fire. After the war, when the revival of the French army began, the lessons of Czełusz were included in the officer training program. A special course dedicated to the analysis of catastrophic defeats of the initial period of the war appeared at the Saint-Cyr Military Academy. Colonel André Beaufray, one of the leading French military theorists of the post-war period, emphasized, "Czełusz taught us that even numerical superiority is useless without tactical flexibility and technological parity. We paid for this truth with blood twice, first Polish, then our own." The Battle of Czełusz has left us with lessons whose relevance hasn't faded even decades later. This tragedy became a kind of litmus test, revealing fundamental truths about the nature of war and human life. What then can we glean from this dark page of history? The first and most obvious lesson is the cost of neglecting intelligence and analysis. The Polish command, which sent thousands of soldiers into a deadly trap, was guided by incomplete data and outdated notions of enemy tactics. In the modern world, where information becomes a key resource, this lesson takes on particular significance. From Vietnam to Afghanistan, from Iraq to Ukraine, underestimating the enemy and overestimating one's own capabilities invariably leads to catastrophic consequences. The second lesson concerns technological parity. The courage and self-sacrifice of Polish soldiers proved powerless in the face of superior German firepower and tactical skill. This lesson is especially relevant today, as the technological gap between different armies of the world becomes increasingly noticeable. 21st-century military conflicts clearly demonstrate that bravery without appropriate technical equipment is a path to tragedy. The third lesson lies in the realm of military ethics. The German command, which created the perfect death trap at Czełusz, demonstrated the highest level of tactical mastery. But can the cold-blooded annihilation of tens of thousands of people be considered morally justified, even in wartime? This question has no simple answer, but it forces us to ponder the limits of what is permissible in the art of war. The fourth lesson is connected with historical memory. For Poles, Czełusz became a symbol of national tragedy and at the same time, a symbol of resilience. For Germans, it was a reminder of the dark pages of their own history. For Russia and France, it was valuable tactical material. Each country drew its own lessons, processing the events through the prism of national perception. This demonstrates how important it is to preserve the multifaceted nature of historical memory, without reducing complex events to simplified interpretations. The fifth lesson concerns the value of human life. Behind the stark numbers of casualties lie thousands of personal tragedies, unfulfilled destinies, orphaned children, widowed wives. Modern society, accustomed to the impersonal statistics of casualties in news reports, needs a constant reminder that behind every number stands a human life with all its hopes, dreams, and possibilities. Finally, the most important lesson of Czełusz is the fragility of peace and the danger of militarism. The tragedy of 1939 was a prologue to the much larger catastrophe of the Second World War. And today, as new conflicts ignite in different parts of the planet, this lesson resonates more strongly than ever. The memory of the road of death is not just a tribute to the fallen. It is a reminder to the living of how fragile peace can be and how destructive war is. This is the universal significance of the tragedy at Czełusz, an event that occurred over 80 years ago but has not lost its relevance for our troubled times.